Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen.
Toward the end of Lorenzo de' Medici's life, Florence came under the influence of the fiery Dominican priest Savonarola, who swept through the city, whipping up an intense Puritan-like zeal, seeking to cleanse it of both church corruption and the pagan excesses of the Medici years. He felt they had gone too far in their celebration of classical philosophy and sought to cleanse the city's soul. There was a shadow on the Medici reign, as we have said. Too much centralized power, too much unelected power, and toward the end of Lorenzo's life, the strain of what he was prepared to do in order to keep it took its toll. In the end, his willingness to do bad things in order to preserve his vision unravelled his family, created new enemies, and ultimately attracted the wrath of Savonarola, upon whom Calvin, the great Swiss reformer, would later heap much praise. In many ways, the Protestant Reformation, which was to follow years later, was a ticking time bomb. Lorenzo died in 1492 at the long-time family villa of Careggi. Savonarola visited him there on his deathbed. Some say he damned Lorenzo as he lay dying, but no one can truly say. What we do know is that Savonarola had a huge effect on Botticelli, who, disillusioned by Lorenzo, became a devout follower of the new Dominican priest. There is even a rumour that he burned several of his paintings based on classical mythology in the great Florentine bonfire of the Vanities in 1497. The reign of Savonarola was short-lived, however, and he himself was burned at the stake several years after seizing control of Florence. Giorgio Vasari said Botticelli had lost his way. He spent the next few years focused almost exclusively on creating a series of black and white drawings to accompany Dante's Divine Comedy. Some say he found healing for his loss and disillusionment, but he never again painted scenes from the classical world, and he is said to have died impoverished, and after his death fell into obscurity. Unlike Botticelli, who painted his Annunciation at the end of his career, Leonardo da Vinci painted his at the beginning, when he was just a 21-year-old apprentice to Verrocchio. Nevertheless, the work is regarded as one of the most famous and celebrated Renaissance paintings. Leonardo had an intuitive grasp of sacred geometry, for when a grid of the golden mean proportion is superimposed upon his painting, it fits perfectly. The Virgin is depicted at the first stage of the Annunciation, the moment of disquiet. The lilies feature too, perfectly painted, the ones in bloom, symbolic of Christ's future wounds, and we see the highly developed use of linear perspective and the chiaroscuro, creating the three-dimensional elements even in the folds of Gabriel's robe. The angel's face is luminous and so lifelike, a forerunner of his future great works. And in the composition as a whole, we already see Da Vinci's genius. Looking back, it's easy to see the progression from the days of the earlier Byzantine and Gothic iconography through the early Renaissance and onward to the heady days of the Quattrocento. Technically, the Renaissance lasted until about 1527, some say, and ultimately revolved around the later luminaries of Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Raphael, who rendered his own Annunciation in 1503. After this, art took a very different turn. There was a change in Mary's status too. In the not-too-distant future lay the Reformation, and later the scientific revolution and enlightenment, all moving toward a more rational and secular world. And in the Protestant North especially, Mary was no longer a figure of such magnitude. And some Protestant reformers demanded the removal of her image from churches by citing the prohibition of idolatry and the manufacture of graven images of God. As a result, statues and images were damaged in spontaneous attacks and iconoclastic riots. Luther refused to celebrate the Feast of the Assumption on the 15th of August, and in the 16th century, Protestants were told, "Ye shall sing no more praises to Our Lady, only to our Lord." And with these two acts, the ancient goddess was no more in Northern Europe. Botticelli, celebrated artist of the Quattrocento, would be practically forgotten, as we have said. And in 19th century London, you could buy an original Fra Angelico painting, now worth millions, for under £30. At home, he was always revered, yet in the Protestant world, he had become irrelevant. But then came the Pre-Raphaelites.